Tasteless made a video saying, after 100 hours of Warcraft 3, here are my honest thoughts on the game. And since Tasteless is quite a legend in the RTS sector, I am curious what he has to say.
My background as an RTS player, I started playing Warcraft II and Command & Conquer around maybe 2nd or 3rd grade and was completely obsessed.
Same.
I played a ton of other RTS games that are maybe not worth mentioning. They were kind of one-offs. RTS games were pretty popular back then.
Dark
it was mostly
Rain.
point and click, as well as, like, and when I say point and click, I mean point and click adventure games as well as RTS games. And then Brood War came out, and I was totally hooked. I played on LANs at some of my friends' house. There was like,
when I was younger, Brood War was too hard for me. I couldn't. I was very young though, but I couldn't beat it. It was so hard.
a small PC cafe in Kansas City I would go to sometimes, maybe like 4 or 5 times. But eventually we got internet, and then I discovered the joy of real multiplayer in RTS games. The only multiplayer I had really experienced before that was like playing my brother in a Nintendo game or a Sega Genesis game, or let's say going to an arcade and maybe playing somebody in a fighting game and experiencing how intimidating that was. And, you know, how, especially in an arcade, how important it was to try to do your best because you only had so many quarters before you had to go home. And what I loved about...
That's so sad, man. In Germany, we didn't have arcade halls. Or we don't have arcade halls still. I think it was kind of prohibited to enter when you're below 18. Because it was oftentimes in one venue with, like, gambling stuff. I never had the true experience of an arcade hall when I was younger.
Multiplayer games, and as an adult now, as a man, I really appreciate how punishing they can be and how rewarding they can be. It's a humbling experience to play an RTS game, and you know, I remember just having my whole reality shattered getting on Battle.net. I had this whole fantasy that I was a great player. It turns out I wasn't, and I had a lot of work I had to put in. And it's taught me a lot about my life and why, you know, games are valuable and important, despite a lot of people treating them like they're degenerate or a waste of time. That was my background in RTS. And I remember seeing Warcraft 3 get announced, and I was ready to switch over. I kind of thought, okay,
Really?
This is the next iteration in what I guess I would call now my career. At the time, I thought as a, you know, a competitive player, an aspiring pro. The first day the game came out, my brother and me, we went down. I think it was called EB Games back then, but basically like a GameSpot or whatever you want to call it. We got the game, we brought it home. I didn't even play the campaign, just so you guys know how hardcore I was.
I still remember I got this game on our way to a vacation. And I got the game in my hands as for some reason on release day, we drove to an electronics store, bought me the game, and then we went on a vacation for 2 weeks. So I wasn't home for 2 weeks and I couldn't play this game for 2 weeks. Even though I had it in my hands. That was the worst vacation ever.
I was ready to just dive into it. I think like a lot of people that want to be competitive, especially like in a multiplayer game, you just want to dive in almost like you're going to get a head start from everybody. You know, honestly, maybe that was a mistake for me because I think I didn't give me the time to play the campaign, and the campaign in some ways sort of sets your expectations for what the game is.
Yeah. I would never jump into multiplayer if I have the option to play campaign first. Never. Even though I probably, for a lot of games, get the wrong perception of a game via campaign, but I have to get used to like the base mechanics and units and stuff.
And that is that it is a hybrid in a very special game that, you know, there was nothing like this that was made before, and there weren't really many games or maybe any games that were made like it after.
Nothing. No game is like Warcraft.
Warcraft.
No game is like Warcraft. Some people will say, well, Spellforce is somewhat like Warcraft. It's not the same. It is not the same. Nobody has this mix of RPG and RTS that Warcraft had. And no game even tried. I mean, Year of Rain or what it was, but it was supposed to be a Warcraft clone. I mean, they ripped off Warcraft like in an insane way, and it failed. So nobody even tried because the game is so perfect.
At the time, of all. Did I play the StarCraft 1 campaign, chat? Yes, I did. But I didn't have internet back then. You got to remember, this was like, I got internet like a few months after StarCraft 1 came out, and then it was like all multiplayer, right? Warcraft 3 really was maybe the most special game that Blizzard's ever made, in that they took all their RTS knowledge. And remember that while they were making Warcraft 2 and StarCraft, they were also making Diablo. And now that I've had the fortune of being able to meet the people at Blizzard, I realize they're really into Dungeons and Dragons and board games and card games. So Warcraft 3 in a lot of ways was kind of this merger of all other games put together in one. RPGs and RTSs. And so...
Because everybody loves like a Tanya in Command and Conquer, right? Everybody loves the Kerrigan and Raynor characters in StarCraft. So why not turn that up to 11 and make it even better? It's such a genius concept. I cannot understand why nobody else tried this after Warcraft. Cannot.
These are the misconceptions I had when I came into Warcraft 3. And also, these are the misconceptions that a lot of people, StarCraft 1, StarCraft 2, and other RTS games have about Warcraft 3, in case you're like a real fan of the game. And, I feel like Warcraft 3 has gotten a bad rap.
Yeah.
And I especially appreciate that after training for this big tournament. So, the misconceptions, A, that the game is slow.
Yep.
If you're not watching from first-person perspective like we're looking at in this game, the game can look slow, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't seem like there's that many units on the board. It, at times, seems like they're both playing against armies of computers, which they are. But when you actually sit down and play a game, you have to be going crazy fast. Every move on the map counts. And so, from a StarCraft perspective, I just thought, Brood War was a faster game, a more intense game, and I didn't really appreciate that. Number 2 misconception is that the engine is...
I think that is right, especially from the outside perspective. And from the outside perspective also, a lot of things look so simple when you look at them from the outside, while when you execute them, it's really freaking hard. You don't even think about it. Like, because we have so few units, every unit matters, and everything in general matters. What you have, where you are, what you're doing. So in StarCraft, oftentimes, parts of your army are just defending, right? Because you, for example, don't have a town portal. So obviously, parts of your army have to be defenders, so you're not getting overrun. In Warcraft, that's not the case. Every unit has a purpose at the very time, at that very place. That's something beautiful about it. Nem, thank you for the 55. Yeah, something very, very beautiful. So, yeah, so you don't have that much multi-screen action, but that makes the one screen where you're at 3 times as important.
Weird and bad. And it is literally the opposite of that. The engine is, you can play so perfectly.
Sorry, I kind of ruined that statement.
More intense game, and I didn't really appreciate that. Number 2 misconception is that the engine is weird and bad. And it is literally the opposite of that. The engine is, you can play so perfectly and so smoothly. If you are good, you can like bend time and space in the game. It's crazy. One of the problems that comes with RTS games is they all have different engines. StarCraft 2, in fact, has even been criticized for maybe being too smooth. Units are too slippery. Things move too fast and in unison. But I think one of the mistakes that happens is somebody comes from one RTS engine and enters another one, and immediately it's just like putting on, a different pair of clothes that you think doesn't fit, when it's actually just the whole cut is different, the look is different. And so even Brood War has this same challenge. A lot of people think Brood War is just a buggy game. Brood War is actually, when you're good at it, you can work your way through the bugs pretty easily, and you can actually exploit a lot of micro because of the way the units at times kind of stick on each other. So I just wanted to point that out. It's actually a really good engine. It's really smooth. It takes some time to get used to, but it's really well made, and you can see why.
Yeah, it's like, obviously, playing this game for 20 years, it's so natural to move in Warcraft 3. But every time I play another RTS, whether that's an old one like my Command and Conquer playthroughs recently or some of the new ones, it's just different. Is it like, it's not that it might be more comfortable with some quality of life features that we are missing, but it's just so natural. And units move so nice, and it's not in unison like all the time. Like not everything is synchronized, but there's some life to it. There's a uniqueness to it, to every unit also.
Why it was the foundation for MOBAs, which comes in later on. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Third concept I thought that was really misunderstood about the game from a StarCraft player's perspective is that there's no macro. And I think it's forgivable for StarCraft players to perceive the game that way, because in StarCraft, you're just making a lot of stuff. Like, we're looking at a game right now with two great players. There's only, you know, as far as we can tell in the minimap, one base for each side, right? So from a StarCraft player's perspective, in a game where you're trying to consume the whole map, surround each other, counterattack into maybe their third or fourth base, maps where you're maybe dropping in a bunch of different locations and there could be several battles happening at once, which, by the way, does happen in Warcraft 3. I think from that perspective of macro developing RTS like StarCraft 1, like StarCraft 2, like Age of Empires in a lot of ways, Warcraft 3 just looks like a smaller, simpler game. So I wanted to point out all three of those ideas that are, in fact, not true when you start to learn it.
I very much agree. There's also, like, yeah, it's not too much economy. It is very simple when it comes to economy. There's gold lumber. You have both available at every base. You go usually 1 to 2 bases. Very, 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 very rarely more. A little bit map dependent, but whatever. So that's just the bases, though. But we have creep routes and creep camps. So parts of your resources are items and the gold you get there. And parts of your resources is experience. And that's 2 layers. 2 layers to macro. That's in no other game. You don't have to level up in StarCraft. You don't have to hit a certain level at a certain time and ideally have that perfect item at the 4-minute 50 mark so you can go for the burrows of the orc, right? Doesn't happen. There's other timings, for sure. Upgrades, army, tech, etc. But because creep routes are so important, and of course it's PvE, right? Like, there might be another misconception that like PvE stuff isn't that important, but then there's also, you have to learn how to manipulate the creeps and run around the creeps perfectly. That's another, like, you don't only face your opponent, you're also facing the environment. If you constantly run into these murlocs that are on display, you get poisoned on every single unit. You don't want that. On other camps, you might be running into Ant-Snare that might result in a kill. You have to avoid that. It's stuff you have to know. There's another layer. And that is, like, from the outside, it's just a bunch of neutrals, dude. I just, whatever. No, there's way more to it. And then you have to think about the order. And then you have to think, oh, if I go there, I can get a second base. But if I go there directly, can I even hold this? Do I have a high enough level if my opponent pushes me? Or do I have to go for this camp, this camp, this camp? So then I'm level 3. I'm a little bit later with my second base, but I have this new summon that can help me out, hold against the opponent, etc. It's not that easy just because it looks easy.
But could keep a player who's a hardcore StarCraft player away. Now, there's also some issues, I think, that come with the game that don't make the game bad, but they are undeniable obstacles that stand in the way to appreciating Warcraft 3. And by the way, there are obstacles that stand in the way to appreciating a lot of different games. If you look at, fighting games. I mean, they're extremely punishing. It's hard to learn combos. That's very intimidating. It drives a lot of people away. Games like Counter-Strike, Valorant, Dota, League of Legends, because they're inherently team games, sometimes you have bad teammates. That's another inherent obstacle.
Ooh.
Doesn't mean the game's not worth playing, but you have to be ready to deal with that or work your way around that. And RTS games in general, I mean, you have to basically know all the units. You got to, understand the theme of the game. A lot of times appreciating the map in a way can be, barriers to new players getting into it. But I think these are a couple obstacles in the game that are fair and have kept a lot of players out. The first one, and this is a problem in a lot of RTS games, but I think it's more true in Warcraft 3, and it does go away, by the way, before we have backlash with me saying this. I think the art style, if you don't know Warcraft 3 very well, it's a little bit confusing. Like, even in this shot right now, there's a lot of green. The grass is green. The hit point bars are green. The auras on the ground are green or yellow. Contrast is extremely important, and we're seeing this as a challenge in even these newer RTS games that are coming out. Is visual clarity is key.
Yep.
I've casted StarCraft 2 more than any game in my career. Maybe I'll never catch up to another game. Maybe there'll be no other game that will catch up to StarCraft 2 in my life. I think there are problems with StarCraft 2 in visual clarity. There's sometimes too much purple and gray and brown on certain maps. I think it has a little bit more visual clarity than Warcraft 3.
I think this is a tiny bit unfair. Like, if you observe a StarCraft game, it's always red and blue. In this case, yeah, green is blending in with the grass because the grass is also green, not only on the other side, but on every side. But if this green would be blue, then automatically you have a lot more clarity. And I say that while we stand in the lake, and I realize how stupid that is. But hey, then pick yellow, right? You get the argument. Green is not that great from a visual perspective. That's for sure. But yeah, sometimes, especially with like Shaman, where the major color is white. But I think it's like mostly very, very well done in Warcraft 3.
But I do think that's worth pointing out. There's also an issue with, I think, the pacing of the fights. If you come from a StarCraft background, you see a lot of things being hit and running away and kind of crashing into each other, and it could be misleading. I think an advantage that StarCraft has inherently over a game like Warcraft 3 is that the battles are so fast, it's really clear who won. StarCraft 2 is the fastest RTS game. Warcraft 3, and when I say slow, I don't mean the game is slow, but I mean the fights take longer. StarCraft 1 seems to be a little bit of like the Goldilocks pacing in fights, and that the fights are certainly slower, and you could do more in them than StarCraft 2. But they're fast enough that I think people can digest them, and I think that's why it was a huge successful spectator sport in Korea. Although Warcraft 3 was massive and still is massive in China. Number 2.
Do I agree with that or not? The question of who won a fight is a bit more confusing in Warcraft as well, because we have levels and items. And like heroes, levels, and items. So in StarCraft, of course you have different unit values, but in general you get a sense of who has the better army at the start of the fight. And at the end, the player with more units left won the fight. Also, they don't have a town portal, so if you engage in a fight, you are in that fight most of the time. In Warcraft, there's a lot of questions. Of course, what's left? So, one side can have only the heroes remaining but lost all the army. On the other side, you lost all heroes but you kept all your army. What's better? Then there comes experience in. With the heroes being alive, did you get that level advantage that will carry you? or not? Or can you use your remaining army to maybe get to the tavern because you have a lot of gold and you can get the heroes back, and then it's not really a problem? And then also, how many items were used? Like, maybe you didn't lose a unit, but you lost 3 heal scrolls, a big mana potion, 3 invul potions, and then that's also 1,200 gold value. And the town portal then, of course. That is... I agree that it's not that easy. But it's not easy because the game's so different. And yeah, also town portals exist. And it's hard to get out from a fight. Oftentimes, I, as an uneducated StarCraft observer, feel like games are pretty snowbally. Especially in the very, very, very beginning of StarCraft. Now less so. Way less so. But in the beginning, you won one fight and you won. But it's also like a nature of a new RTS, I think. I like this back and forth of Warcraft. I like that dynamics can change within a fight. I like the multiple layers to this. The thing is, you said this a few streams ago, it's more about who can stay alive to win the final battle. Because it doesn't matter how big of an army you have if you can't stop your opponent to get a better army. The buildings in Warcraft also have a purpose and can fight, not just units. Yeah, I think that can apply similarly in StarCraft. Like, if you survive a fight while waiting for your next tech, then you outlasted your opponent. Or if you're fighting so your next base can stay alive and then you can outmass your opponent. That's like a classic trope in RTS, I'd say. That's due to heroes. If Warcraft had no heroes, fights would also be obvious. Yeah, that's pretty much my point. That's pretty much my point. And I don't like these super fast fights. Like, you have one big ball of units and another big ball of units, and the balls clash, and then at the end there's one lower ball of units. In Warcraft we have this tug of war, right? Sometimes fights can last 5 minutes. And that's awesome. We love it. There's probably people who don't. But they got no taste, and we all know it.
On challenges for Warcraft 3, I think the upkeep system, while being very interesting in the game, completely throws people off.
Really?
It's a very difficult concept to understand.
Really?
I'm not saying it shouldn't be in the game. I think it actually makes the game really interesting, and it's something worth celebrating, and it's something we don't really see in other RTS games.
Yes. But
that is a really tough thing to throw into a game where you're trying to grow and expand and dominate the map. You're trying to creep. It's a confusing thing because also just the math of income isn't always obvious, right? Like, I'm so glad I had Tara coaching me because he could explain to me, all right, well, we're going to lock in at this moment. When we get 1,000 gold, we're going to dump it all into the rest of our units. We're going to do a timing push, let's say. But that's hard to just pick up on, right? Like, in my head, I'm thinking, do I want to stay on low upkeep forever? Do I want to maybe just kind of be on low upkeep for a while and then, you know, try to ride that out? You know, it's just not obvious. So I think that's an inherent challenge. I think it's one of the things that makes Warcraft 3 a beautiful game. But in a game where you already had creeps, you already had items, and you have like units with so many different abilities, some can be auto-casted, others have to be manually done. It is a lot. And then
I could talk about upkeep for a long time. I think the concept isn't too difficult to understand. I think people overestimate upkeep in one-on-one for sure. Because I think as a new player, up until like, I don't know, 1600 MMR, 1700 MMR, no upkeep or low upkeep don't matter. High upkeep is very taxing, but that's something you don't often do. I think up to the highest level, like 10-15% of the ladder, you don't have to think about upkeep at all. Just go, 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 go. It's an advanced mechanic. It's not something that a new player automatically has to understand. Because for a new player, it's way more important to do something on the map, to not forget production. And maybe in that way, it's an entry barrier, as people are not incentivized to produce all the time. The math is rather simple, but it's never displayed anywhere really, except the late game score screen that nobody really checks. So nobody really knows how much gold you lose. Like, it's not super clear. It's just intuitive. And we have a chart for that, right? So it's not that bad. It's not that much in a one-on-one. In other game modes, way different talk. But the game tells you that it's very important. And the game doesn't tell you about anything else that it's really, really important. You produce your stuff, and then you break upkeep, and you get this message. Boom. It even has the text up top, right? Low upkeep, high upkeep. Sound plays. The game tells you, like, uh-oh, should you be doing that? And of course, as a new player, you think, oh, what did I do? Was that really the right thing to do? The game tells me something, gives me a notification, huh? You don't get this boom level 3, boom tier 2. You get that. It's only with upkeep. So I think the implementation of upkeep isn't perfect, and the storytelling or the notification isn't perfect, but I think upkeep is one of the most genius inventions in RTS, in all of RTS. So a lot of people will say, well, I read an interview from a Warcraft 3 developer back in the day, and they wanted to decentivize people from building big armies, so they put the upkeep mechanic in because the machines weren't ready. It was a technical thing. I don't believe that for a second. And then people try to argue against upkeep with that one quote. Upkeep is the single best comeback mechanic in any RTS, I think. You can be mega greedy. You can be smart and invest into items instead of a bigger army. If you're super far ahead after a fight, you still have a penalty, a smaller penalty, but there's a penalty. It's brilliant. It is freaking brilliant. And if you want to have a high army, you have to pay for that army. Like in real life. I love it. I love upkeep so much. I think every RTS should have upkeep. It's such a good mechanic. As long as it's not overdone, right? As long as it's not taken, like you build 2 more units and it takes 50% of your income or something. 100% agree. Upkeep is a superb mechanic. There we go, man. There we go. Yeah, it's awesome. There's a couple of misconceptions about Warcraft as a whole. One is this: upkeep wasn't supposed to be in the game, but they implemented it to prevent bigger armies. If you want to prevent bigger armies, like, set the food cap lower. That's the reason. Like, make it 80 instead of 100, or keep it at 100, but make the units cost more. That's how you prevent bigger armies. Also, if that's the reason that you don't want to be too heavy on people's machines, then why do 1-on-1, 2-on-2, and 4-on-4 have the same upkeep and food cap mechanic? That makes no sense to me at all. It is a brilliant comeback mechanic, and it's so smart. And more RTS should do it.
And I think the third problem, and again, it is both a benefit and a curse, and this kind of what I was just talking about earlier, I think segues into this point, is decision chaos. You're just having to make more decisions in a Warcraft 3 game, which I think makes for more interesting games. But I think it's also harder to kind of step into as a player.
Agree.
Is like any game that's going to have creeps, it's like, well, do I want to creep? Do I want to expand? What items do I need? What hero do I need? And so the game is set with a very challenging board to start out on. I wasn't even sure when I went in, when Grubby invited me to this invitational, if I was going to be able to do it. I'm working out my marriage visa, which I think I'm going to be getting in a week or two here, because I just married my Korean girlfriend, now wife. So I was taking care of like a ton of paperwork, and just it was like a lot. It was like very overwhelming, a little bit stressful, going in and out of the immigration office. And then I'm sure some of you guys saw I'm actually I just launched a StarCraft 2 tournament because StarCraft 2 is in a terrible spot called the RSL. We have a Patreon for that, by the way, patreon.com/revivesc2.
Very cool.
And so I'm basically working with a production company to build out a studio here in Seoul.
That's crazy.
So we can do live matches, and that's been exciting. If you want to join that, feel free. It would mean a lot to me. But so I had these two big things going on, and then Grubby invited me to this tournament, and I was kind of like, oh man, I don't know if I have time for this. I'm not even going to be streaming as much as I normally would. My wife convinced me to do it, and I thought, yeah, you're right. And I was kind of waiting for an excuse to learn Warcraft 3. I've been sort of waiting for this my whole life. When I stopped playing a few months after the game came out and went back to Brood War when I was a kid, I was like maybe a sophomore in high school. I stopped playing because I didn't understand the beauty of the game. And then I would go to this website called Gosu Gamers. In my computer classes, when I was in high school, we had like internet in our classes, and I would take some coding classes, but really all I was doing was watching esports news online.
Yep.
I was impressed to see that Warcraft 3 had a huge following. A lot of people were playing it, and I kind of thought, man, this is just a crazy. I thought everybody was going to stick with StarCraft 1, but people instead also were playing Warcraft 3, and people are still playing Warcraft 3 to this day.
I don't feel like many StarCraft players transitioned though, right? Not too many. A couple for sure. But it's kind of... It's not too common that you hear, oh yeah, I played Brood War before and then I switched to Warcraft. It's just so different. I feel like Warcraft 3 attracted a lot of people that weren't diehard Brood Warriors, and made them Warcraft diehards. But it's not like they stole a lot of audience from Brood War. And that's great, by the way. That is great. Different flavors to a different audience.
Grubby invited me to this big tournament. I'm really honored to play in it. And honestly, I think I'll be playing Warcraft 3 off and on for the rest of my life because of it.
Cool.
If you haven't tried it, I would recommend it. The community guides online are great. The people in stream chat are good. I do think the Warcraft community occasionally talks way too much in shorthand when trying to help you, by the way. Where I'm like, I don't know all these abbreviations. You gotta speak to me like I'm a child right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we do that. We do that for sure. For sure. We take a lot of things for granted as knowledge. And if we explain something, I am 1000% included in this, by the way. If we explain something, we have to start at very, very, very basics. I tried to do that more in casts, but now I kind of slip back again. I should do that more again. Yeah, for sure. This is why Grubby's so good, by the way. That's why Grubby is so good. He doesn't have a problem explaining things for the 100 millionth time. Well, I think, I mentioned this so often already, I don't have to explain it again. But there's always new people. And experienced people are not getting thrown off by that. They're like nodding to it. Like, yeah, nice. He's explaining something. And I knew this already. I feel smart now. And the new player is like, oh, I understood that. Nice, now I learned something. I should definitely do this more and not take knowledge for granted. But since we had no, like, there was a long time where we didn't have a new influx of people. So I thought a lot of information that you can portray is redundant then. It's tough, man. It's tough to not fall into this mindset of everybody knows this anyway. So for example, in my cast, I say obviously a lot. Because to me, it's obvious. To the majority of our channel, it's obvious. Like, there's a footman army. He's fighting headhunters. Obviously, he wants defend. For new player, it's not obvious. Why is defend? Why is that ability now good against headhunters? Should explain that in a little side sentence. That's enough.
But yeah, it's a good game, and you know, over the past maybe 2 or 3 years, I've started to appreciate a lot more RTS games. I think what happens when you really get into one RTS.
Good point. It's a delicate balance. If you don't want to talk about basics if 90% of your stream already knows all this info. Yeah, but that is one point. But the 90% don't mind if it is repeated. They won't applaud you for it. It's like, oh my god, that was a brilliant explanation of why piercing damage is good versus unarmored armor type. But the 90% don't care when it's explained again. And the 10% that don't know, they appreciate that a lot. So if you can make a tiny effort of one sentence or half a sentence, you know, it's so easy, then why not do it to help the 10%? It's like, there's similar things, and I really hope this is not becoming a political thing now, but when I start my stream, I oftentimes say, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody outside and in between. It doesn't hurt anybody to greet anyone who doesn't identify as lady or gentleman. It doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't hurt me to extend that sentence. It doesn't hurt you when you hear it, but the people, and it's not 10% for sure, but these people appreciate that. So if you can easily improve conditions for a subset of the audience, why not do it? It doesn't cost me anything. Stuff like that. That's just an example. That was the first example that came to mind.
Games, you go to the next one and you just see how it's different, and you think, I'm gonna have to unlearn all this stuff I already knew, or I'm so used to expanding in a game like StarCraft. Why would I go to Warcraft 3? Or if you're from Warcraft 3, you might think, I'm so used to creeping and microing big fights. Why would I want to go, play Hungry Hippos where I try to gobble up?
Oh, that is a very interesting discussion in chat now. I mean, I can't really talk about Warcraft that much because I haven't really followed for a long time, but when I was really into Dota, sometimes over-explaining everything during cast was becoming a bit repetitive, but reminds me then how super helpful it is for sure. I agree. And I have to think about it. Like, I would say, this is something I can't decide for myself. So, for example, one could teach a lot of basics in the beginning of a tournament, but the further the tournament progresses, you have taught these basics already, and then you could tune it down a little bit, and for the final stages, you go more into an entertaining style and like more tailored towards the remaining players that are, for example, in the final four. But then, counter argument, only the diehards who know everything are watching the group stages, and the general audience are watching the grand final and the semi-final. So should you be more explanatory in later stages of a tournament, but then it could actually take away the enjoyment for the diehards. That's an interesting balance that I don't have the blueprint for. I would basically benefit from basic information during Warcraft cast for sure. While I was more on there, I already know all this crowd doing Dota events. Yeah, it's like finding a balance, I think, and it's also in a game you can find the balance. In the early game, you can break down the story of players, you can break down the story of a matchup. There you can explain stuff. In the middle of a fight or in super tense moments, you probably shouldn't. But after a fight is settled or during a creeping phase, you can explain a lot again. Yeah, it's all about balance and the time and the place. For everything, there's a balance, and for everything, there's a time and a place. Just have to make it work. I think the possibilities that there are casuals only tuning in for later stages of a given tournament as if it was the season championship of an actual sport is unlikely. Fraser, the clicks on YouTube videos that have grand final in the title are like 6 to 7 times higher than any other video. So, of course, grand finals are viewed by a lot more people. Because it's the most important game, right? If you only watch one Warcraft game a week, you're probably going for the grand final.
The whole map like a game in StarCraft, right? But it's definitely worth it. I also wanted to point out, like, just kind of going big picture here with Warcraft, it is probably, while being maybe the most special game that Blizzard made, because it had such a huge impact and has in some ways been neglected shortly after its birth by Blizzard. Let's remember that the game came out and almost immediately Dota came out, and Blizzard wasn't paying attention to that. I think Warcraft 3 came out, and then World of Warcraft came out after that, and that became the huge cash cow, and Blizzard basically neglected the game.
Yeah.
Despite it being so important and so huge. And Blizzard, look, we're almost in the wrong timeline, because if Blizzard had been paying attention, they would have been running Dota, and League, Riot Games wouldn't exist, so they wouldn't have that competitor. And at the same time, Dota 2 wouldn't exist. Right, and so they would have had
crazy,
the
right?
MOBA market, and the MOBA market's massive, so it's a big misstep.
But to not go too far from that argument, because Blizzard abandoned the game in like 2006 or something, a lot of people have that misconception about the game now. Because 2 years after Blizzard abandoned the game came the most popular time of Warcraft 3 Esports. In like 2007, 2008. And so the game was in one of the worst states when most people were watching, and then didn't really pick up on the game while it was being patched again. Then, of course, they got the Reforged disaster. That got a lot of attention, but for other reasons. So the entire journey that we've been through from 2000... When did they start patching again? 2018? 2017? To now, 2025, they all missed. They missed the big Warcraft patch where heroes like the Alchemist got huge treatment, and all the units and heroes that weren't used for 15 years got buffed, and that undeads can now expand all of a sudden. And that human can play one base again, and that you have different openings, and it's not always the same hero composition and the same unit composition, always the same timings as it was in like 2008. They all missed that. But we know it. And we know how good the players became. and how everything changed basically about this game. And so there's still the misconception from. My point is, there's still a lot of misconception from the state of the game that was way worse than it is now, and that is still repeated to the scene or to comments about this game today on forums. That's now been countered by stuff like the Grubby Invitational and the Tyler audience, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, that was my point, basically.
By Blizzard. It's also evidence, which is, I think this is obvious now, but back in the day, this was revolutionary, is that RPG elements can bleed into almost any game and make them better. I mean, Elden Ring and the Souls-like games are great because they took challenging, action elements and exploratory elements, but really built in great hardcore RPG features. Warcraft 3 did that with an RTS, and I think if they had marketed that maybe a little bit better, it would have been better received, but it is no doubt like a really special game. It's really important in gaming history. So I want to thank everybody that came by my chat to help me. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're always welcome to come by my stream. It's Tasteless TV on Twitch. I'll be playing off and on when I have time. There are some new RTS games coming out, like Tempest Rising just dropped, so I do want to check that out. But, there's a lot of great RTSs out there. Warcraft 3 is certainly one of them. It is a challenge to learn, but it's also very rewarding. And the things that I thought were going to be kind of dull, like creeping and doing that, are actually really exhilarating. You just got to start to play people that are going to be challenging, and then you'll start to get that same rush you get. And it's also at the same time while it's similar to a lot of other RTS games, it's a very different and fun experience as well. So those are my final thoughts. I think Warcraft 3 is an excellent game. It's worth checking out. Special thanks to Grubby for inviting me to his Invitational. You can find my games of that on his channel, as well as me casting with him. I did get to cast some of the games there as well, especially, what did I cast? The Viper versus Sing Sing. That was a lot of fun. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think about Warcraft 3 or this video.
It's the best game ever. It is the best game ever. I think it's a very fair video here. You wouldn't expect from someone... I mean, Tasteless is obviously a great guy from what I know. He got a good mind for RTS, but it's easy for someone who spent 25 years in StarCraft to be a StarCraft elitist, especially when your brand is a big part of StarCraft in general. Unfortunately, a lot of StarCraft fans are elitist, but I don't think that goes for content creators at all. So it's good that it gets the appreciation it gets. And the perception of Warcraft is swinging a little bit these days. Misconceptions are countered, and more people are getting exposed to the brilliant state that the game is in right now, on certain levels, when it comes to gameplay, at least, and strategy and stuff like that. Variety, especially. And it's super cool that this tribalism that we had for a long time in RTS is getting weaker and weaker. I see a lot of Warcraft people in StarCraft chats. I see a lot of StarCraft people in Warcraft chats. I talked to a lot of Age of Empires people at the event that I was at here in Hamburg, and they appreciate the game. A lot of Warcraft fans are also watching Age of Empires because it's a whole different game compared to StarCraft and Warcraft. I see a lot of people talk about Tempest Rising when I'm on, because I played a little bit of Command and Conquer as well. I went a little Command and Conquer viral on the Reddit, and they were super nice. So I feel like whatever happened the past couple of years, like we all know, like not only is our game a niche and a niche and a niche and a niche, but RTS in general is a niche and a niche and a niche and a niche. And we should just be RTSers with our very own special flavor that we like the most.